Hello, and welcome to today's episode of Constructive Conversations. The intention of this podcast is to explore the mindset and actionable strategies that empower entrepreneurs to achieve holistic success in all areas of their life, while inspiring listeners to confidently pursue their own ambitious dreams. The reason I do this podcast is because 10 years ago, I knew I wanted to start a business, but I had no idea where to start. I had no role models to follow, so the goal is to provide that inspiration for new entrepreneurs and to provide fuel for those who are already doing it. Joining us today is Leslie Wingrowich. Leslie is a former ICU nurse who has overcome some formidable challenges in her life. So on the show today with Leslie, we discuss being told that you could never walk again at 34 years old, reversing that diagnosis over the course of a year, writing a book, thriving in all aspects of life, the importance of connecting with your creator, removing toxic influences from your life, pursuing your true passion, and the connection between mind, body, and spirit. This is a great episode. Make sure you listen right to the end. So Leslie, thanks so much for coming on today.
Hi, Nick. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you. Let's get right into it. I mentioned briefly your story. I haven't finished your book. I have been reading it, and it was great. It's a gripping story. Can you just talk a little bit about that journey and overcoming this big obstacle?
Of course, Nick. So as you said, I am a former ICU nurse. I was staying home with my two children. I'm a mother of two. And as you mentioned, after the birth of my second child, she was 3 months old at the time. I woke up to hear her crying for her morning milk. And I woke up to discover I was paralyzed on my right side of my body. I was rushed to the emergency room where I had an emergency MRI, and I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. The neurology team was very direct and blunt, and they said, "You'll never walk again." They gave me some pamphlets on how to make my home wheelchair accessible. I was 34 years old at the time, and it left quite a bomb in my lap. Certainly not something that I was anticipating, certainly not something my husband was anticipating. And I was left with a decision to make. And the decision was very simple. It was, are you going to sink or are you going to swim? And I took matters into my own hands, Nick. I'm quite a bookworm. I like to research. And I was finding that there's people all over the world that are reversing not only multiple sclerosis diagnosis, but autoimmune diagnoses as well. So I took matters into my own hands and laid out a plan for myself to get my life back on track.
That's amazing. And how long did sort of that process take? Because what does your life look like now? Obviously, you're walking around, you didn't need the wheelchair. So yeah, sort of how long did that journey take to, find the information you needed and implement it?
So I had a pile of self-help books in my master bedroom, and I remember it like it was yesterday. I pushed the stack of books from my ensuite to the baby's room that was not being used at the time because she was still sleeping in my husband and my bedroom, and I turned it into my battle room. And I made a plan for myself. I knew that this autoimmune disease, which is a fancy term for I don't know, whenever you're diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, it's basically the medical system saying, I don't know what's wrong. And there's no cure. They give you some immunosuppressants, generally medication to help with pain, but nothing to heal you. And I was a former athlete and was always very active and fit and healthy. And here I was now at a staggering 222 pounds, 5'7". I had a very stressful career. Not only was I ICU, but I was also trauma, working at the largest trauma center in Western Canada. And it was a very stressful job. And my husband and I were dealing with some things as well on the family front. And what I believed was my body was saying, no more. I can't take this anymore. And what I had to do was I had to unravel this incredible ball of tangled yarn that was dropped in my lap. I was obese, sick, had a lot of turmoil in my body. So to make a long story short, Nick, I actually reversed my diagnosis in 4 months. I laid out a plan, as I mentioned. It was a 15-point plan that I have outlined in my book. And I followed it, and here I am.
That's amazing. 4 months. Yeah, it sounds like you took some some really definite action. And was that catalyzed because of the situation you were in, or was that sort of the attitude that you had previously? Being a nurse in the situated environments that you were in, was that the type of person you already were, is my question, to be able to come up with a plan and execute on it, or was there a shift, like a mindset shift that happened?
Absolutely. So I believe that everything that happens in our lives happens for us and not to us. And as I mentioned, I was an athlete as a child, as a young adult, and I was molded into having a very go get 'em attitude and not to give up. With my nursing background to come into play, I really enjoy researching, and I really enjoy learning and looking at things from all angles. So it was quite a few different things. But when the neurologist looked at me and said, "You'll never walk again," and was not taking into account that I was stressed, that I was not putting healthy food in my body, I just thought it was very strange that these questions were not being asked, because I do believe that we are in the pilot seat of our lives. And at this particular time in my life, I realized that I had made the unfortunate shift from being a pilot to a co-pilot. I wasn't even driving the plane. I wasn't even driving my own life. And I went right back to basics. I realized that the food that we put into our body matters. The material that we watch with our mind matters. The environment that we live in terms of high stress, the careers that we choose, this is all very much a factor in how we present ourselves to the world.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I had, as I said, shifted to the co-pilot seat, and I realized that I needed to take my power back, plain and simple.
Right. So then sort of that transition was going from co-pilot to pilot and saying, so it sounds like, you were at one point, earlier in your life, you were in the pilot seat, and then you sort of, maybe even like unconsciously ended up in the co-pilot seat. And then you actively decided, no, I'm not going to let, my circumstances dictate my life. So then you decided and made that shift, and which is amazing in 4 months. And what does your life look like today? So you're not in the ICU or a trauma nurse anymore. Yeah, how is your life different today?
Well, first of all, Nick, I really like that word that you used, unconscious, because that's exactly what it was. I was unconsciously living my life. I was on autopilot, thinking that my actions were not going to have a reaction. So yes, I'm no longer in the hospital setting for a few reasons. Primarily, the reason is I am home with my children. I believe that my calling is to be home with my children, so that I can raise them to show them how important it is not to become a co-pilot in your life, and to be very conscious with the decisions that we make. And the other reason, Nick, is I'm not interested in putting myself back into a hospital setting where I was before, where I believe that perhaps our mindset is not on the same plane. I do believe that we are in control of our lives. And what I'm doing now is I'm working with people one-on-one to help them reverse their autoimmune conditions. And what's neat as well is, not only did I reverse my autoimmune disease and I have a clean bill of health. I'm not on any pharmaceutical medications. I just eat clean, healthy food, and my body healed itself. Not only did I do that, but I noticed that all areas of my life started to become whole, well-rounded, I should say, in terms of my family relationship, friendships, my marriage, my children. I realized that being happy, healthy, and whole, it spreads into every facet of your life. And it's been really quite a spiritual awakening as well.
So yeah, the transformation wasn't just limited to your health. It sort of carried through all aspects of your life, which is perfect, because that's what I like to talk about on the show is, not just success in one narrow area of life, because some people succeed in one area, might be a business, and then, they're failing in other areas. But you've sort of made that change where where everything in your life has improved, and in that positive upward cycle. So
Most
that's great to
definitely.
see. Uh-huh.
Yes.
And can you talk about your book? What was it like, writing that, going through that whole process and getting it to publication?
Well, I actually really struggled in the beginning because I had so much to say and I didn't know how to outline it. And I actually do mention in the beginning of my book, I went rather distressed to a little coffee house in the earlier writings of my book, and I met an incredible gentleman there who was a Holocaust survivor. And we just had the most incredible conversation. And I was teasing him. I said, "You should be the one writing a book." And he said, "No, no." And I told him what I was struggling with. And he said, "Well, what do you want to relay to the reader?" And I said, "Sir," and he was 85 years old. And I was just so humbled by his presence and his story. And I said, "Sir, I want to tell people, I want to show people how easy it is." And he said, "Well, I would imagine that you created a plan for yourself." I said, "I did. That's exactly what I did. I created a plan, a step-by-step plan." And he said, "Well, what's the problem then?" He said, "Just write out the plan that you created for yourself." And that's exactly what I did. I was actually diagnosed in January, and my healing journey took place over the course of a year. So what I did was I incorporated 15 steps and just had basically one step per month. And and it just unraveled from there, because initially when I was diagnosed, I realized that I had lost vision in my life. What did I want for my life? Well, I certainly didn't want to be fat, sick, and nearly dying. And I wanted to be healthy, happy, and thriving. And that is actually the first step of the book, is finding your vision. What do you want for your life? And if you are living a life that is not in line with your vision, how can you accomplish that, and how can you get back on track?
That's great. And is that those 15 steps, is that part of what you're using now with the people that you help?
That's exactly right. And sometimes I find in my life, I'm learning too. I'm not perfect. We're all growing and learning and evolving. And sometimes I get off track as well, whether it's with my eating, or maybe I'm watching, something on social media or television that it's not encompassed with my morals and my values. And I have to check myself, for lack of a better term. And I actually go back to the 15 steps that basically saved my life 5 years ago, and it just keeps me on track.
Wow, that's great. And can I go back? So you mentioned the spiritual journey as well, and like I consider that one of the important aspects of the well-rounded life, like you talked about. So can you talk more about your spiritual journey, what that looked like?
I am living proof that it's incredibly important to connect with our Creator, and whatever that looks like for you. I personally am a devout Catholic. You could be Buddhist, Muslim, but it's very, very important that we are understanding that we are a creation and we are connected to a higher power. And the analogy that I use in my book is, when you see that red light of your battery dying on your cell phone. I mean, if you're anything like me, you freak out and you're trying to get to the nearest cell phone charger, and you're trying to charge up your phone, because our phone is a very important part of our lives. Well, the analogy that I use is, I believe that we have an invisible extension cord coming out of us, and we spend our entire lives without plugging into source. And some people use that term source as an interchangeable term for God, or a higher power, or the universe. And for me, it's attending church and attending mass and filling my spirit with the word of God and what his plan and purpose is for me. And when I got sick, I realized that it had been years, decades since I had plugged into our power source, which I believe is the Creator. And however you do that, for me, as I mentioned, it's church, going for a walk in nature, connecting with the Creator and all of his wonderful creations. And I realized that I had lost touch with the Creator, and in turn myself. And I needed to get back to who God created me to be, and and what my purpose and plan was. And here lies the business.
Yeah, wow, that's such a great analogy. I love that. That most people are walking around without their batteries plugged in, or without the extension cord plugged in, and then there's all the different avenues, yeah, to connect with your creator. I love that. For me, for example, it's meditation. So yeah, like and this has been recent for me in the last year, where I have a very specific meditation practice morning and evening, and that's exactly the point, right? Is connecting with your creator.
I like that, Nick,
Yeah.
because in my book, I talk about prayer is talking to God and meditation is listening to God. I find sometimes when we get wrapped up in our lives and we get busy, we certainly talk a lot to God. I want this, I need help with this, I'm overwhelmed with this, I don't know how to handle that. But meditation, as you mentioned, is when we go quietly into our bodies and we connect with source, with God, and we just allow that information to come in and guide us. And that's actually how I came up with the 15 steps. I actually asked our creator, how can I unravel this ball of yarn and this tangled ball of yarn, and going into that quiet space within is how he led me.
Wow, that's amazing. So you asked, you received the answer, you were open and aware enough to hear the answer. So you had the physical resources, like the books and the knowledge that you were accumulating, but then it took that sort of that inspiration from the higher power to say, okay, this is how I'm going to implement and create this change. And I'm really interested in that, because that's something I've struggled with is in other terms, trying to listen to God and distinguish what's God's will for my life versus the ego's will, or selfish desires. Can you talk about that experience, about picking up, distinguishing that signal out of the noise and using it in your case to make this huge life change?
Absolutely. So a key to that is obedience. When the Lord speaks to us, we have to be obedient to him. But coming back to your question is, how do we hear the Lord's voice? How do we hear God's voice? And how do we know it's him? And just like you said, how do you know it's not ego, it's what your selfish desires? Well, when you quiet your mind and when you remove toxic influences in your life, whether it's toxic food that we put in our bodies, whether it's toxic products that we surround ourselves with or put on our skin, even the products that we clean our homes with. When you start removing toxicity from your life, and the most profound change in my life was removing toxic individuals. I don't believe that there's such thing as good people and bad people. I just believe that there are different vibrational frequencies. Some people are vibing high, as my little girls and I like to say, or some people are vibing low. And when you're not on the same vibrational frequency, that can be very dangerous. It can affect your mental health, it can affect your emotional well-being, and it can affect how you hear God. So when you remove these people from your life, and when you remove these toxic influences, and then when you go internally through prayer and meditation, so as I said, prayer is asking God and meditation is listening. So when you ask God, what is something, I think one of our favorite questions that we all like to know is, God, what is my purpose? What is my plan? Why am I here? What do you want from me? When you go into that quiet space inside, that is when you can hear his voice. And to answer your question, Nick, when you remove toxicity and people that may be catering to your ego, then you're able to hone in on the voice of God. And it actually, in my life, I find that it's like a muscle. When you go to the gym, when you work out, initially the workout is going to be a bit challenging, and it's going to be a little uncomfortable and maybe even a bit foreign. But as you continue to exercise your spiritual muscle, as you continue to listen to God's voice, you'll actually be able to discern what is his voice and what are the voice of people that may not be steering you properly.
That's another great analogy, and I like that, and how just removing the toxicity, whether it's people or chemicals in your life, and then that that sort of takes away the noise, so you can listen more carefully and pick up what's being said to you. That's great. And then can we talk about, so your business now, is it your own business then, I take it, where you're helping and coaching people through their own autoimmune issues, right?
It is, Nick. So I tried to go back to the hospital because that's what I knew. And what I realized was I actually want to do this for a living. I want to work with people one-on-one and teach them how to do this. I want to teach them, and I want to show them that, yes, it is work, and it is hard work at times. Working on ourselves can be so painful when you're bringing up unfortunate traumas of our past or even traumas of the present. But I believe that if you follow these steps that I have laid out, it worked for me, and I believe that it can work for others. It's certainly working for my clients. And being a former ICU nurse, I really enjoy a plan. I really enjoy step 1, do this. Step 2, do this. I really enjoy that. And that's what I want to give to my clients.
That's great. And I can appreciate making that shift. So I was formerly a firefighter, which I believe your husband is a firefighter, right?
He is, yes.
Yeah, and I made the leap to entrepreneurship because I thought, that this is what I'm being called to do. This is where my passion really is. But there's those transferable lessons. What was it like to, making that decision and saying, I'm not going back to this career? Most people would consider it's a great career, it's a great job, very secure and stable. What was it like making that leap and saying, no, you know what, I'm gonna do my own thing and run my business because this is what I feel like I need to be doing?
It was incredibly difficult. It was incredibly difficult. And I actually had to go back once again to my 15 steps because I had to remove the voices. My former colleagues, quite a few of them, thought I was crazy because I had worked so hard to achieve the level of success that I had obtained. And in their mind, I was throwing it away. And I realized that when God creates our soul and has us walk on this earth, I realized that experiences is one of the major reasons why we're here walking this earth. We're to experience and meet new people and challenge ourselves. And then one of the other steps in my book is what makes your heart sing. Initially, working in ICU, working as a trauma nurse, very much made my heart sing. It fed my soul. Helping others, it was something that I really enjoyed doing. But then after I got sick, after I healed, I felt a paradigm shift where I genuinely felt through prayer and meditation that the Creator was leading me down a different path. And now I feel that I understand that staying in one career for your entire life may be fine for some, but for me, I wanted to experience an array of experiences, things before the Lord takes me from this earth. I feel that I didn't go through this incredibly changing diagnosis for nothing. I believe it was very much for a reason. And it really warms my heart when people call me on the phone or reach out to me on my social platforms and say, I can do this too. If you can do it, I can do it. How can you help me? So I'm still very much a nurse. I'm very much a registered nurse. I'm registered in my province. And I want to just extend my knowledge, certainly not throwing it away as I've been told. In fact, I think I'm supercharging it.
That's great. And I like how you described it as, what makes you sing. And, previously it might've been this song of being a nurse and now it's a different song. And that's, the symphony of life that people describe it. It changes. And then it's beautiful that you're able to follow it and have the awareness to recognize, this is what lights me up now. So this is what I'm going to pursue. Yeah. Can you talk more like in terms of your business and your clients? What's like one of the greatest successes you've had since, or experiences even since taking that leap?
It's really beautiful to see my clients thrive and wake up to the life that I believe God wants them to live. I believe that it's so easy in our fast-paced, noisy world to get lost and forget what our heart desires. In the Bible, it talks about we need to have childlike faith. We need to act like a child. And I never understood what that meant. If I act like a child, I'm an adult. I don't understand that. Once again, on my spiritual journey, I now realize that when we were children, we would run and play, and we had dreams and aspirations and goals. And then we get worn down over time by the heaviness of our world and the heaviness of life. And no, I don't think that we're to bury our heads in the sand to the pain and the suffering of our world. It's important. We're all connected. We need to pray for each other and support each other, but also not to let it consume us. Because when you look at children, they're so full of life and goals and ambition and energy. And that is what I found with I call it my spiritual awakening, because I found myself. I came back to that child within me that was playing and enjoying life. And I certainly wasn't enjoying life when I was 222 pounds, crawling around on the floor, paralyzed, gasping for breath. I had to get back to who I was. And it's very encouraging for me and soul lifting to see that my 15-step plan is breathing life into people that was inspired by the Creator.
That's amazing. I like how you said you found yourself. So, like you mentioned, most people, they'll start out as a child, they're open to everything, everything is new and exciting and it's fun. So then you slowly get closed off by whatever circumstances or societies, and then you went back and found yourself. I think it's in Shakespeare. Above all things, know thyself. So you went back and found yourself, and so that's a great outcome, even like from going through these challenges, that you were able to find that. Yeah. So you mentioned like you get to share sort of these steps on your social, and people will reach out to you there. So what is your sort of your outreach look like? How do people find you? How do customers find you? What socials are you on?
Well, coming back to my prayer and meditation, this is what I'm working on right now. One of the other things that I work with my clients, and this is something that I'm working on in myself. So I do have Facebook and Instagram, Leslie Wingrowich, lesliewingrowich.com, which I'm working on right now. My short-term goal, Nick, is to put on a course. I want to have people that can share in my learnings through a course platform. I put together the course. It was really rather simplistic because I just expanded the book topics. And now I'm actually giving talks at local health food stores, and I want to record that and make it available to people on a larger platform. So to answer your question, it's in the works. But right now, social media, Instagram and Facebook is the best way to reach out to me.
That's exciting. That's really cool that you're giving the talks. So what does the future look like? So like launching a course, I can see how that, that makes your content available to many more people rather than just the one-on-one conversations. What does the next 3-5 years look like for you? Where do you see yourself?
I see myself speaking on a large platform to spread the word throughout the world about how we are in control. We are very much in control. We are in the driver's seat. When you are given a disappointing or upsetting diagnosis, that's nothing more than your wake-up call. It's not the end of the road. It's not doomsday. It's just simply your wake-up call to reset, to go back, to find yourself. You do have to work, but it can be done. So where do I see myself in 3 to 5 years? I will on a larger platform and help them. I want to help people on a larger scale. So that is where I believe the Lord has taken me from the hospital, where I was limited to 3-4 patients a day. I'd like to be able to help people on a larger platform.
That's great. That'll be exciting. I'll keep an eye on. That'll be exciting to watch as the stages that you're on and the platforms start to grow. What about, do you have another book in you? Are you planning any More books at this time?
That is so fun that you're asking me this question. I'm just picking up my phone here because I want to look at my notes. I actually looked this up last night. I was creating in my mind last night. Oh, and I can't find it now. No, I can't find it. The answer is yes. The answer is yes. I have a few more books. I'm going to be turning this into a series, and I believe I haven't settled on a title, but I want to have the next subject as live like you're powerful, live like you're unstoppable. And I want to show people that not only did I heal myself of this crippling neurodegenerative diagnosis where I was told I was going to die very young, now I'm thriving and other people can do the same, and it's really not that difficult.
That's great. I like how that's a continuation, you can make the change and then sort of live that change and carry that out throughout your life. So that's great. Okay, I have some rapid fire questions here for you as
Oh
we
my
get to
God.
the end. So just short answers. Do you read or do you listen to books?
I read.
Read. Okay, awesome. Favorite hobby?
Horseback riding.
Nice. Do you prefer emails, phone calls, or texts?
Oh, that's hard. It depends on my mood. It depends on my
Okay.
mood. Depends on my day.
Yeah.
But I would say
Yep.
generally, you know what I like is voice notes. My girlfriends and I, we send voice notes back to each other. I find it's more personal, and I can hear the sound of their voice, and we just connect on and it's quick, and it's quick back and forth, which we like that too. So voice notes.
Yeah, I like that too. My family is South American, and so Latino is always with the voice notes, but you get tonality, and so I think that's a great way to communicate.
Yeah.
Do you prefer driving or being driven?
Driving.
And you take a little longer on this one. Top 3 books.
Oh gosh. Oh, Nick, that's hard. That's really hard. Okay, I have my book here, and I have over 50 references in my book of books that have completely changed my life. Okay. One of my top books is by Lorna Byrne, and she is a author living in Ireland, and her book is called Angels in My Hair, which I refer to in my book. She has been seeing angels since she was a young girl, and she is ranked as one of the 100 most spiritual, influential leaders of our time. She doesn't speak above a whisper. She's just the sweetest lady. She's on all social platforms, and she teaches us that we are a soul that was created by God, and we have a guardian angel. And she tells us how to connect with our guardian angel and how important our guardian angel is in not only protecting us, but guiding us through our lives. And I've developed through her book a connection with my guardian angel, and he's directed me in ways I never thought possible. So that's book number 1. Okay. Book number 2. Oh my goodness. Okay. This is a tiny little book that I found in a secondhand store for a quarter. It was 25 cents. And it's by Hill and Hill, and it's called A Husband-Wife Team. And the book is called Fasting for Breakthrough and Renewal. And they are a Christian couple, and they took biblical references about the importance of fasting. And I, being a medical professional, I understood and did some research on the benefits of fasting and how when we eat, it's a tremendous amount of work for our body to digest food. And when you're in trouble medically, when you have an autoimmune disease, fasting is phenomenal because it just allows your body to rest so that it can heal. But I never explored the spiritual aspects of fasting. And there are people in biblical times that changed the course of history by simply not eating and delving themselves into prayer. Even Jesus Christ fasted for 40 days and 40 nights in the desert before he began his mission of spreading the word of the Lord. So I started fasting, and I find that when you abstain from food and you're hungry, it throws you into prayer and it clears your mind. And then when you go into meditation, which we talked about the importance of meditation, you can really hear God's voice, and it becomes addictive. So I no longer fuss about problems in my life the way I used to. I would call 1,000 girlfriends, call my mom, Google it, research, throw myself into a tailspin. And now all I do is fast and pray. And then the answer comes. Easy peasy. So that's book number 2.
Great.
This is my favorite question, Nick. I love this question. Okay, what is my last book? Oh gosh. Oh, Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life. Louise Hay, she was such a pioneer. She passed away a few years ago, I believe. God rest her soul. She was such a pioneer talking about how I healed my life. You can heal yourself through affirmations and fasting and praying and speaking nice things about yourself and putting healthy food in your body. As I mentioned, Nick, it's not rocket science. It really isn't. And I think we make it far more complicated than it has to be. And I think when we're diagnosed with something that's really, really uncomfortable and scary, and we're told that our bodies may succumb to this and we may die, that initially we run to the easiest solution, which may be pills or some sort of a pharmaceutical treatment, which I think is phenomenal in the short term. And as a former ICU trauma nurse, I am not anti-pharma, not even close. If you get yourself into a car accident, the last thing you want is Reiki or a deep tissue massage. You need hydromorphone or fentanyl or something to ease your pain while we set the bones back in place. I'm not anti-pharma, but what I do believe is that when we take control of our lives and control of our health, we realize that putting a Band-Aid on the wound, whether it be, for MS specifically, it's autoimmune suppressant drugs. I was told that these drugs were not going to heal me, that I would never walk again, and that it was just going to basically prolong this pathetic existence. And I knew that if I was going to heal myself, I would have to go deeper, which is exactly what Louise Hay talks about in You Can Heal Your Life. Those are my 3.
That's great. I love it. Great recommendations. I'm going to check some of those out. One last question. So if there's people who want to start the journey, maybe they have a diagnosis, or they just feel like their life's at a point where they need to change. They want to find themselves. What's step 1? Where should they start?
Yes. So there's coming back to that mind, body, spirit. So how do we connect all 3? Because when we are diagnosed and we're sick, we're out of connection. So mind, body, spirit. So the very, very first thing that I would do is, what's your vision for your life? Where do you want to go? How do you set your sails? I grew up on the ocean. When you're sailing, how we set our sails is very important. It completely changes the trajectory of our sailing trip. Do you want to crash into the shore, or do you want to sail into the horizon? And that depends on how you set your sail. So find your vision. And for me, it was as simple as, I would like to walk again. People may think to themselves, well, of course you want to walk again. So I just got more specific. I wanted to play with my children. I wanted to ride my bike. I wanted to drive my car. And so I had that vision in my mind. So that was controlling the mental aspect of it. Body, I had to look at what I was putting into my body. I was smoking. I was alcohol. I was watching shows on TV that were violent. And I realized that those are 3 very, very simple things that you can change. Instead of listening to music that the lyrics may not be uplifting, I was listening to classical, high vibration music in my home. I was listening to online preachers that were talking about the power that we hold in God and who we are at our foundation, and being very mindful with what I put in my body. No processed foods, no sugar, really healthy foods. And that in itself is easy as well. If God made it, then you can eat it. And if God didn't, then don't eat it. And it's just incredibly simplistic. Soul, as I mentioned, I got back to the Creator, fasting and praying. For me, it was going and attending Catholic Mass regularly. For you, it may be fasting and praying in your backyard, and sit and ground yourself in the beautiful grass and connect with nature that way. But it would be a mind, body, soul connection.
I love it. That's a great place to start. So I'm sure that'll be helpful to listeners. So Leslie, where can people find your book if they want to give it a read?
My book is available on Amazon in Kindle, paperback, and hard copy. And the title is Live Like You're Not Scared.
Great, thanks. And we'll make sure there's a link in the show notes so people can find it there. So Leslie, it's been great having you. It's a pleasure having this conversation. I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Nick, thank you so much for having me.